There's a word I hear a lot that seems to cause artists and makers to immediately cringe. They hear it and they automatically say, oh no, no way. That's not sustainable. That doesn't work for my business. That doesn't work for clay. That doesn't work for fiber. That doesn't work for whatever medium or whatever other version of the word no you want me to come up with. And I've always been rather curious, or, come on, let's be honest, suspicious of, frankly, any sweeping statement about something not working in totality forever and ever. Okay, I'll stop being vague here. We're talking about wholesale, my friends. Even just saying the word wholesale, it kind of feels dirty. It's like a 4-letter word to artists. Put it up there right alongside marketing. So clearly, it's right up my alley. Does it have to be this way? Are there actually possibly viable, sustainable ways to have a wholesale business as a maker? Well, that's exactly what Steve Tubbs is here to share with us, alongside a seriously amazing strategy for planning your entire year's making cycle that, personally, given the opportunity, I would absolutely borrow/steal if I were you. And we'll hear all about it right after a brief word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of The Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to The Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Cara. Hey, Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's pretty exciting.
I was thinking you're not so far from me. We're at least in the same region. We both probably have about the same temperature or in the same number of layers of clothing.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually a little bit warm at the moment, because I quit 10 minutes before we started here, taking down our Christmas lights because it's like 50-odd degrees outside. It's like crazy warm for the...
We are so in the same place because I literally did that this morning.
Awesome.
I took the dog for a walk and on the way back was like, right, it's today or it's April because we just got to make the time to do this.
It's busy, yes.
Well, so people actually know where you are, who you are, since they can't see you. How would you introduce yourself?
I'm a potter. I make functional stoneware that for everyday use, a lot of cups, bowls, things that you would associate with food. Like 80% of everything I sell has a handle and you can drink out of it because of that popularity of the ever-present mug. And I hope that pottery, engages and elevates the daily experiences that somebody has chosen, my mug out of the cupboard to enjoy that first cup of coffee, or we even put ours in the freezer and drink milk out of it for supper time, So part of engaging and with your consumer is that everyday use that starts to make that connection. And I'm also a husband, a father, a grandparent, and as we just said a minute ago in our warm-ups, that grandkids are like the most awesome thing. And I hope to pass on the pottery thing. I have 2 granddaughters here in town that are 10 and 8, and for the more than a year, actually, we try to have like a little pottery class once a week and make things. And they're starting to toy with the wheel, but it's been mostly hand building, and it's a lot of fun.
I wish people could see you in this because The way your smile changes and the way you light up when we talk about your grandkids is adorable.
Well, I'm also a youth hockey ref, and the two girls play hockey, and the ones that are in town here. And then I have three more, and two of those play hockey, and one plays basketball. So I'm kind of the dark side there. Her dad plays basketball, so I guess we're going to allow that. But just last weekend, both of them scored in a winning hockey game, and I was on the ice reffing and 20 feet away, and they're able to make eye contact while they're celebrating with their teammates and going, nice. It was like, okay, keep it together, Steve, keep it together.
I was just thinking, how did you not react? Because I've got a feeling there'd be some opposing team members pretty upset to discover the ref of the game was a direct relative of the other team.
Earlier in the season, I would say if a random player all of a sudden hugs me, it's because I've got the granddaughters on that team. But then I decided I didn't need to plant that seed.
Well, where are we, before I get ahead of myself, you are in Minnesota, but remind me exactly where.
Albert Lee, which is a town about 20 miles north of Iowa. So the very south, straight south of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And it's a town that my family moved to when I was 6 years old. And the only time I've been gone is to finish college at the University of Minnesota. So lifelong resident.
I was going to say your life. How big is it?
A little under 20,000.
Do a lot of tourists come through, or do you get a lot of traffic en route to the Twin Cities or anything like that? Or how does that kind of affect your business and what you make is what I'm thinking.
Well, Albert Lee is actually on the intersection of Interstate 35 and Interstate 90, both of which go coast to coast. But unfortunately, it never seemed to jump off the map because of that. And no, it's not a tourist area. We grow corn and soybeans and raise cattle, and it's not a tourist area. There is support within the town for the arts, but it's not a big market by any means. So as I imagine we're going to touch more on this, but my business model is wholesale. I'm sending pots all over the nation to shops and galleries. And a lot of those go to tourist areas. And so that very much drives the market. And anybody in pottery tends to know that there are, pottery appreciation hotspots. And the north of the Twin Cities is that way with the St. Croix Pottery Tour. Asheville, North Carolina, that direction, and surrounding. I have several shops into Virginia, so that area is quite large. And then Maine. I sell more pots in Maine than I do in Minnesota.
That's funny. So this is what's really interesting to me, and I think hopeful, because it's kind of showing you can choose your life first. You can choose where you want to live and then build a business around what that is, rather than, in previous careers for me, it felt like I had to physically be at an epicenter of activity for that to kick off, right? So how did you get connected with all these shops all over the place then?
The journey's long. Do you want me to take you on the journey?
Let's do it. I'm here.
When I'm listening to your podcast, I love the journey. So, it's everybody growing up usually has clay in grade school and junior high maybe, and you make your little clay animal and whatever, and that's all fun and good. And I always was a fan of art class in school, but it wasn't until I was a senior in high school that, and I don't even know why, that took an art class, a pottery class, and there were potter's wheel. And it's like, oh, now this is cool. This is cool. That immediacy, and even though immediacy was struggled to get your clay together and make one pot and make it to Mr. Fairchild's accounting class on time 50 minutes later. I'm telling you how many times he gave me the look as I walked into that class with clay all over me, but fell in love with it there. And so then following fall went to Austin, which is 20 miles from Albert Lee, and there's a junior college there, and took pottery there. And sometime during that time, as I'm pouring through Ceramics Monthly, because that's one of your other guests mentioned that back in the day, because we're graduated high school in 79. So that was the only stimulation, the pictures of pottery, that you could find was Ceramics Monthly. And there was, a couple other magazines, but I never did get those. And they had an issue about it was probably called the 10 most influential potters at that time. And one of them was Warren McKenzie. and he was a professor at the University of Minnesota. So I said, that's where I'm going then. But the life plan was to return home and continue to work with my father in his Ben Franklin general merchandise variety store here in town. So the natural course of events is, yeah, I'm going to take pottery, or that was in my mind, but accepted to the School of Management. And I showed up for orientation, and it's like, here's your schedule for the next 2 years. And I went, when do I get to take pottery? Well, Steve, that's the College of Liberal Arts, and you're in the School of Management. Any classes you take from any pottery classes you take don't count towards your degree. That you don't get any credit for that. And I must have had a really distressed look on my face because the counselor left the office and said, we might have something for you. Let me check. Came back a few minutes later and presented what is called, I don't know if they still have it or not, Bachelor of Individualized Studies. So we sat there and put together a program that was 2/3 business and 1/3 ceramics. And then you just worked the plan and you graduated on time.
That sounds perfect.
I know.
I think now, just for anybody curious now, I think the terminology, it's kind of like an independent study, but instead of just on a course level, it's on a degree level. And I know some schools do that, but you definitely need to know the right counselor.
Apparently. And I was really lucky that day. Yes. Because that would have been a miserable time. Yeah. And by this time, I had my own potter's wheel because the summer after my first year at Austin, I was looking through Ceramics Monthly and I'm like, Mom, look, they have this week-long pottery camp, I don't know, camp, whatever you call it, up in Duluth, which was northern Minnesota. And you go there and you get to make pottery for a week and come home. She goes, well, instead of spending money on that, why don't you just get a potter's wheel? What? You'd let me do that? Like here at the house? Well, yeah, of course. So I did that and bought a really used kiln and put it in the basement. Side note, don't ever put a kiln in a basement because ventilation is virtually non-existent. And the only thing that probably saved me is I didn't know what I didn't know at the time about how dangerous that was.
Ours is currently running a glaze kiln in our basement.
In your basement? What are you thinking?
With vents. It's vented. It's vented, to be fair. It's vented.
Yeah, that helps. But I have 2 of them in the garage and they're vented, but there's still an odor. And if there's an odor, there's something there.
Well, yeah. So, yep.
And I have 2 kilns and they're both cooling right now with glaze loads.
Nice.
Then I have to throw the switch because when they pull 48 amps, you can't run them both at the same time. Anyway, digress.
Let me know if an alarm goes off that we need to all we'll have a kiln break, a kiln check break during this episode. Hold on, gotta.
You let me know if I need to stop because mine are cooling. They're coasting right now.
Francesco's got the alarm set on his phone, so we're good to go.
So several months before starting college in the University of Minnesota with first Warren McKenzie, which is a name that many, many people would know, he retired. And blessed that there were 2 instructors. The other one is Curtis Horde, and he was wonderful. I learned tons from him, particularly how to critically look at pottery and make decisions about form. That's the thing that sticks out, and I, time to time, on a fairly regular basis, think of that connection to this day, developing that critical eye. So I had gotten married to my high school sweetheart, who's upstairs finishing supper, and that's our nice thing after we took the Christmas lights down. And we rented a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd story in an apartment building, unrolled oilcloth over the carpet in that 2nd bedroom, taped it to the woodwork, plopped the potter's wheel in the middle, scrounged some shelves, and, made as many pots as I could because I was already at this time doing a few art shows, going to parks and malls on the weekends to sell. And then I had things in my dad's Ben Franklin store back in Albert Lea too. But of course I didn't bring the kiln with, so I had to pack up greenware and haul it home on the weekends. And we'd hit Albert Lea on a Friday night and I'd pack the bisque and fire it and it would be out by Sunday. And I'd try to glaze like crazy so that I could load the kiln before I left to go back to school. And then Debbie was working as a legal secretary. Every weekend was just this whirlwind of pottery work, and crazy. And work that around different shows. So part of the journey here is painting the pictures. Yes, I did the art show thing. So fast forward, 3 kids, working in the Ben Franklin and Albert Lee after graduating, and doing a few art shows, but pottery really production really cut back because normal life. Pottery was not the focus. It was the sideline, the hobby, that what you enjoyed, and that's all good. But growing up a retailer, it's fun to sell stuff too. And I tell people all the time, when you make pottery, if you don't sell it, it starts to pile up in a hurry, and you can only give so much away.
That's exactly how I wound up selling it. I mean, I use it on purpose because it was more like paperweights than pots at that point. But, when you're in an apartment, there's only so many places you can put it.
And you've talked about your set of soup bowls that you sold way before you should have. And that's absolutely surely true for me too. I mean, my first art show was the summer after my 2 classes in high school. They let you set up a booth because you were a student. You got to do it for free. And I'm sure I know I did. I had things marked not for sale. I was just showing them. But I had some stuff that I sold. And it's like people went gaga. And it's like, now I think, why?
Actually,
why should they?
That's a really great point, though, that I haven't thought about before, is that a student show is, or can be, hopefully, a really lovely entrance into selling, because presumably the people showing up understand that these are not people used to selling something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking about how easy it was to sell, like, cheese. What was the things we used to sell for band? Wrapping paper and cheese and salami. I was never a Girl Scout, but I was in 4-H and I was in band, and our fundraisers were wrapping paper and cheese and salami. And none of those things were something special people couldn't get at the store, but we were very sympathetic retailers.
Oh, yeah. And boxed candy. But how about, you as a maker, did you ever make and sell pot holders as a kid? Walk around the neighborhood and sell pot, that you make on the loom with the loops?
More like friendship bracelets.
Okay.
Even lower level of skill required. There was no loom necessary. I actually think we probably bought just to bring all of these things together, we had absolutely in the Quad Cities had a Ben Franklin store, but it was less of a general store and slowly became more of like an arts and crafts supplies.
Yes. We did that at Dad's Ben Franklin also.
Okay.
And we were actually the first one to ever have fresh flowers in our store, in addition to the silk flowers that many, many Ben Franklins would have had, which gave rise to my wife and I's business in 1988 when my dad's lease came up and they were going to jack the rent up super big time. And Walmart had already come to town. Shopko had already come to town, which everybody knows Walmart. Everybody probably might not know Shopko because they're at Dequank now also, but they're like a mini Walmart. And so Dad's business was tanking, and yet we cherry picked the fresh flowers, the silk flowers, and the custom framing. You see examples behind me in the video there. My kids' graduation pictures we framed when we had our custom frame shop. And so my wife and I took those departments out of the Ben Franklin store and opened an independent retailer and ran that for 25 years. 5 years in one mall in a small location, then 5 years in the mall across town in 4,500 square feet. And then 5 years after that, we built our own building, added a cafe, and ran that for 15 years. And now we're fast forwarding up into the 2012-13 range when customers would walk in, and we'd added a lot of home decor by that time, and they'd go, "Oh, I've seen that online, for $5 cheaper." And you could just see where retail was going to go. So we closed the cafe, put the whole thing up for sale, and we now have what we call our new lives. So after a stint of working for a friend in his lawn service business, because I was also very interested I went through my gardening phase. Landscape design.
Is this a Midwestern thing specifically, or just a human experience? But it feels very Midwestern to me for everybody to go through a garden phase like that. That makes sense to me.
We've got the land, we got the soil and tons of nice flowers and things.
I think I hope to soon be entering into it.
Well, it takes a lot of time, and I'm happy to say I'm through with my gardening phase, and now spend a lot more time with clay. So this has been a long journey, but in about 2010, I said I am not waiting to retire to make more pots. So that's when Debbie and I talked about it, and we were like, we are not going to do like me, and she's like, I'm not helping you anymore. Not going to go sit in the parks and the malls because although it's fun to interact with the public and it can be quite exciting when you have a great show, you think, all right, here we are, we're lined up with a show a week before Mother's Day, and it turns out to be the first night's weekend of the year, and everybody stays home and rakes their yard.
Speaking of gardening, yeah.
Yeah. And the show's a total bomb, and you just felt like you wasted a weekend, and it was a gorgeous weekend at that, so you didn't get your own lawn raked. And so that's when I decided to do wholesale. And I did a little bit of research and connected with a web platform called indome.com. Indome is apparently a fancy word for handmade or handcrafted. It's spelled INDIEME.com. And it's a collection of people that want to wholesale what they make. There's like well over 1,000 artists on this site. And then if you were a retailer, you just go and you register there for free. And then you might search on the site pottery, and there might be 100 of us that come up. And then you start to look and you go, oh, they make clay critters, and that person makes tile. And okay, here's the 25 or more people that make cups, bowls, plates, etc. And then each one of us have a site with a shopping cart, and the retailer just shops. You name your own everything from minimum orders to how you handle shipping to all the normal details that a retailer would need to deal with. And they place an order and it pops up on my computer, and of course I reach out to them and figure out any questions and tell them when they could expect it. Retailers are not great at planning ahead.
You read my mind on the next question.
Yes, there are definitely crunch times, and you've talked to a lot of your potters, and it's like, oh, I'm dying here in November and December, and I'm getting everything out. I'm like, nope, I'm doing good. I'm having my hot chocolate and watching the fire crackle and making pots for things I'll ship, in January or February.
I would have expected you still would be crunching because there'd be retailers who were saying, oh, we sold out, I need more, or, in some kind of panic.
Yeah, I'm sure that does happen. And having been a retailer for 25 years, you don't really want to receive a shipment of any size of anything, much past the 1st of December. And you get to the 10th of December and it's like, nope, I'm selling what I got. I don't have anything here to send them anyway. I have no backstock. I sell everything I make and turn shops away. That did not happen overnight. That is something you have to build. Any given shop orders, and you get a fair number of them that order one time, and I don't know, whatever. It wasn't for them. It didn't go like they expected. And yet I've got shops that go back as far as the year I started that are still customers. And I've never met them face to face, but I feel like I know them and know their husband's name or whatever, and they're friends. And if you said this is that shop, I generally know what kind of stuff they buy because I have 23 items I currently offer for wholesale, and I have 9 different colors. And I've built that whole business just on the Indome website platform.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. It sounds like, I'm really glad you mentioned this platform selfishly, because it sounds like a more curated version of Fair, which is now kind of the big, anytime I mention wholesale, that's the next thing. If I Google it, that's the thing that comes up. But that doesn't seem to be specific to handmade. So it's really interesting to think about I'm thinking of when Etsy used to be good.
Yeah, Fair was pursuing me for a while, so I was checking them out. And yeah, they have a very broad and liberal definition of handmade. And, this site is, not just pottery, which, I'm sure Fair. And I think there's other ones out there too. I mean, it's got to be, but no need. It's if you concentrate where you are. And I find the site easy to use and it looks professional. If somebody wanted to go see what my wholesale site looked like, I've got like the shortcut to do that.
Oh, perfect. I'll put the link in the show notes. If it's like a particularly long, I imagine it's not a truncated thing.
SteveTubbsPottery.indeme.com. And then you have to click on, are you a visitor with a visitor ID and password? And then there's my number and the password, which is just visitor.
Perfect. I will put that in the show notes so people can check it out. That'll be massively helpful. Because also, as we both know, more than likely everybody's hands are currently covered in mud and they can't take down, right?
It is when I'm listening.
Right. I knew you mostly focused on wholesale. And so to no one's surprise, that's what piqued my interest when you mentioned it. But the fact that you had the background knowledge as a retailer, I imagine allowed you to kind of take a few big leaps forward in those early days that maybe most potters wouldn't have been able to do just because you could speak their language, if for no other reason, or understand like the timeline of the year or something like that.
Because I was a retailer for so many years and I grew up in retail, and when you're choosing a career, it's very much, what a lot of times leads you to be that person. And yeah, and I'm actually third generation retailer. Because of that, I understood their needs and their wants and the perspectives. And yes, I could talk the talk, you're right. And what kind of deals or special programs might I come up with that would interest them, because it would have interested me in the day. High among them, free goods. Order this or this or this or this minimum and you get an extra whatever. I immediately think, well, that's extra profit or that helps cut with freight. And so I have a program with my wholesale pottery business that is right up that vein. So shops need to order a minimum of, I increased it to $500 now this year. It was $400 before that. And then I charge, and I'm at an advantage here. I'm darn near in the middle of the country. So freight costs to California are pretty much the same as they are to North Carolina. Now, if you're going to ship to the tip of Maine, or you're going to ship to the tip of Florida, then yeah, kind of pushes the viability of my program here. But I charge us flat 30% of wholesale as freight. And then I gift the shop 10% additional pottery for free. And I encourage the thought process, sell the 10% and you've doubled your money. You've covered 20% of your 30% cost in freight for the pottery. And if you can land pottery in your shop for 10%, that's a really good number. So that's very attractive to the shops and very popular. And what I get out of it is they prepay me. So before I send it, they send me a check. I don't take a credit card because I don't want to pay the expense of the credit card. Save that. Can't give good deals and incur expense.
Yeah, at a certain point, the math just has to work.
Exactly. So every time I box up, a shipment, it's like, okay, how did this turn out? But the 30% covers the freight, and it almost always covers the free pottery also. Plays out as a win-win. It's like, oh, is that sneaky? No, it's still a win-win because you land that pottery for 10%, where if I didn't have this program, it's going to run you between 20 and 30% to get that to your door. Pottery's heavy. You got to wrap it well, which increases the bulk. And whether you're using FedEx or UPS, they are on a matrix that considers both the weight and the volume of that box. You send a box of cotton balls, you're going to pay through the nose. You send a small box of rocks, you're going to get a better value.
I was just going to say, every time we have to order more, we use compostable packing peanuts. And it arrives on a semi, comes down our residential street, and it's hilarious because out come, I mean, if we ever see, I need to save some of these boxes if you don't get this quantity of kind because the grandkids will go nuts. They're the best, like fort boxes. They're not as big as a refrigerator box. I remember when my grandparents got a new refrigerator and that was an awesome box. So they're not quite that big.
Oh, yeah.
But they're close. We just gave some to a neighbor who's got a little one. But, it's hilarious because we're always the last drop off. They're the last boxes in the back of the truck. And they have to use a lift gate because it's a big enough truck. But they go, we're just picking up the boxes with our hands. It's about as tall as I am, but I just pick it up and carry it into the front door. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, I've developed a range of individuals and businesses that save me packaging. So I don't buy any packaging. Everything is reused. So kudos to, the compostable styrofoam and non-styrofoam peanuts. I use those and whatever anybody gives me. At least it's getting reused and it has the chance maybe to get used again after, it arrives in Maine.
All of our reusable stuff is in the boxes of market box, what we wrap to put in the markets, because then that's an ever-changing quantity of inventory. And then the compostable peanuts are more the one-off online sales, because then we've tested those packaging materials. We know it's going to be safe. We've seen the boxes get beat up and keep a fairly low breakages, because that's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're going to ship wholesale, that's a whole nother learning curve as opposed to shipping the 1, 2, or 4 mugs across several states, because you have to be as efficient as possible, both to keep you as business owners' costs down or to save the shop money so that they don't go, oh my goodness, this is way too expensive. I just can't buy this anymore. The freight's killing me. So you learn to be as frugal as possible, but yet ship it as economical as possible. So what I do is I use bubble wrap, and here's the nugget. The guy down the street from me is both an installer and in charge of other installers for a company called Budget Blinds. I don't know how big a company that is, but every part of the country has to have companies that go to a people's house and they sell them blinds, and then they come back and they install them. Every blind is wrapped in bubble wrap. It is a treasure trove. This guy brings me huge garbage bags, like 4 and 6 at a time. Thank goodness I have attic trusses in my attic. It's like stuffed. I have like 2 years worth of bubble wrap right now.
Your house is actually more insulated.
I'm like, just only bring me the good stuff now. Hunt those people down. They are thrilled not to put this bubble wrap in their dumpster, and you can have all you need.
That's so smart.
Because when you're packing wholesale, and what I do is I have boxes that are about 22 by 22 by 25, which is like a big paper towel box, but you need them, of course, stronger than that. And then I Tetris smaller boxes into that bigger box, because as that box is on the various trucks or airplanes for UPS and FedEx, the pots in those boxes are their own worst enemy. You want them not to be banging around against each other. It's not that a forklift is going to poke a big hole in the side and break one. And only once have I thought, what, did you throw this off the truck? Or, it's just, because usually it's just, if something's going to break, it's like one thing, maybe 2, but I had like 8 things break once. And so that couldn't have been an accident.
That was the forklift, actually.
Maybe it drove over it.
When you mentioned kind of the incentives for shops, my immediate question there was in terms of getting new shops in, especially with like minimums, or because, I know at least in the beginning for us now, shops are leery of taking that risk on a big order at the beginning. And so kind of allowing some wiggle room to say, okay, you can try, your first order can be this size, or you can do a trial set with a smaller number. Is there anything like that that's worked for you, or that hasn't been an issue?
Well, I mentioned that the minimum order for my free freight to offset freight costs at retail offer was $500, but they can spend less than that if they want. They just don't get the free pottery. And in order to discourage them from ordering less, I've decided they're going to still pay 30% freight. Your example is certainly true. People are leery of the larger investment up front, and yet it is an accepted fact in retail that if you buy too little of something, you are doing it for less than success, because it doesn't make a statement on your counter. So, I used to go to Atlanta or Minneapolis for market for the many different home decor lines that we would carry in our retail store. And it is usually the exact opposite of what you were suggesting there. Minimum opening orders are larger than reorder minimum orders. And that is because the person selling the goods, the manufacturer or whatever, they want you to make a commitment. Because when you make a commitment, you're going to make a better display. It's going to make a better presentation to your customer, and you will get a better return on sales.
Right. And obviously, then ultimately they want the reorders. So they want the retailer to put in the work to have the best chance of success at selling your stuff, which in turn benefits the wholesaler because then you're going to get reorders because they put in the work to sell the stuff.
It's a circle that gets the ball rolling and benefits everybody. But that being said, you could still order less if you wanted to.
How has it worked out for you? I think part of the reason I was so excited is that I think a lot of people hear the word wholesale and cringe and think, oh, well, I could sell it for twice as much as what I'm selling it for. Why would I want to do that? And something tells me that's not the way you think about it.
I spend every Saturday either reffing hockey or at home making things. I am not sitting somewhere being unproductive. And having been a retailer, I acknowledge the commitment and the expense required to sell things. And I am willing to give value to that to the retailer. And it does, there's like RD Ceramics. He talks about doing like 26 shows and he still has a full-time job. I'm like, good grief, man. You are also younger than me. I've been there. I've done that. It is exhausting. And why don't you flex your biceps? I mean, because pottery's heavy. I do one retail show a year. And it's a pop-up show. It doesn't even cost me anything to do it. And they have 1,500 people come through in 6 hours. And it's 2 hours away from me. And I bring my granddaughters and bring what they've made.
Oh, that's not fair. That is an unfair advantage.
I know, cute kid with cute pottery. It was unstoppable, man. 2 years ago, they had miniature pumpkins, little pinch pot pumpkins with stems. And this year we had snowmen luminaries in 2 sizes. And the girls are outselling me.
Of course they are. That does not surprise me. If I rolled up to a show and was 3 booths down from you with your grandkids and I saw that, I'd take one look and be like, never mind. I'm phoning it in. I'm packing up. I'm leaving. There's no chance.
My sister's in the same room selling her crafts, and my dad comes over and he helps me bag things up and chats with the pretty girls and oh, Win, you really made this? And she'll stand there and matter of factly tell you step by step by step. And while the lady's nodding her head up and down really slow with this really big smile. And yeah, it's tons of fun. Like I said, grandkids are the greatest.
I believe that this is what we call a unique value proposition, or what is that, finding your unique place in the market. Oh my gosh. Well, so getting back to the wholesale pricing thing, and I agree completely. There's so many things you don't have to do in your business because you're selling to retail. Just in terms of the size of your audience, I imagine, you're not worried about constantly growing a following or an audience or an email list because there's only so many shops that you can service, presumably.
Right. I am the person with the fewest Instagram followers that you have ever interviewed. I have 500 and some.
I'm like, hold on. I'm like, maybe not. We got to look this up now.
Yeah, but I didn't, of course, check. I actually do. I find every time I'm listening, I always okay, got to find these people. What are we talking about here? I have a basic mug that I can make quickly, and I do pull the handles. I am not a fan of extruded handles. I think that handles should be pulled. If you want to have, it's a style thing. And back to that critical eye I talked about, but that is for me. I'm willing to accept that other people do otherwise. But I sell that mug for $16. Up from $15 last year, up from $14 the year before, up from $12.50 the year before. So it's as my business grew to the point where I'm now in year 3 or 4 of turning away orders, it's well, I think I can raise my price, because it's the conventional wisdom is, how much is your clay? How much is your glaze? How much time does it take? What's your overhead? It's nah. I understand that. I do that. But I price based on, what can I get for this? What's it look like it's worth? And yet we've seen clay go from 35 cents a pound to 80 some cents a pound in the last year and a half. Okay, it's still inexpensive material-wise, but that's a huge percentage increase. So yes, our costs are going up. And glaze, I use commercial glazes. I do not mix my own. That's partially a laziness thing, and that's partially a time value thing. There is a huge investment in buying materials to stock to mix glazes. Like I mentioned, I have 9 colors, and the amount of experimentation it would take to duplicate and come up with 9 different things is, well, and to get 9, I'm using 12 or 13 different glazes to get that, because I layer and combination or mix in order to make those commercial glazes my own, not to be something straight out of the bottle.
That makes sense.
I keep going off tangents on the price thing, don't I?
Oh, you're fine. You're fine, because then I go off a tangent, because I think this is something really unique to pottery, specifically compared to other mediums, in that, like, there are so many levels that you can go into so much depth on. And at a certain point, you do have to be really strategic with your time to decide, how much would you have to pay for a pot, or charge for a pot, rather, if you were taking the time to forage your own clay, mix your own clay, research your own glazes, make your own glazes, obviously make the pot in the first place.
I follow a guy up in Canada that does that. And it's like, okay, that's like amazing. I'm keeping my shovel for my shovel was in my gardening phase. I'm not going to go do that.
That's not to say you couldn't do it if you didn't want to, but it would not, in my mind at least, with my knowledge, I would say that is not sustainable in a wholesale fashion, right? Maybe that is a singular sculptural
Save enough to make that worthwhile.
Exactly. Your time.
Yeah, your time. No way.
Like, I could see that working for someone making stuff that, okay, hey, go partner with interior designers and make, like, I'm thinking of the stuff Terry Davis makes with elephant skin and, kind of standalone singular pieces that don't have to be functional that you can sell for a few $100s. Sure, great. That works fine. There's a different model there.
And market the fact that you actually do that, because it is to be admired, and market that to people that appreciate that. I think even more than the economic sense, it's like, what do you enjoy doing? What part of this ceramic business, which is actually your life, do you enjoy the most? I enjoy making. I don't enjoy glazing. I just got done glazing nearly 400 pots. And it's like, oh, this is taking forever. And that's why I've been pumping through the glaze loads. And this morning, my fantastic FedEx guy stopped here and picked up 4 boxes, 2 going to Virginia and 2 going California. And it's like, okay, that's done. That's with the cycle. I still have the glaze loads loading, but what I like is making stuff. I love sitting down at the potter's wheel. I love making handles. I am the unicorn in the handle thing. I like making handles.
Francesca will make you endless amounts of Italian dinners to come visit anytime you want.
Oh, yeah. And when you finish a pot, a casserole, it's something you put time in, and it still hasn't turned that dusty color from when it starts to get dry. That is like the most beautiful stage of pottery, that firm leather hard look. Just love that. So anything that I can do that directs my time to what I like to do in my ceramic life, because I don't even hardly think of this as a job. I tell people that every day is a Saturday, and there are parts of the job that are a job, like glazing. And I sand the lips of the pot and I sand the handles after they're bisque fired so that it's a nicer experience for the end user. That glaze is going to go on and just be silky, glossy to that end piece, when I put in the time to sand those pots. And so it's like, time to sand. It's kind of like the guy making the donuts, time to get sand the pots. But then the cycles ended, and a couple hours before we recorded this, I was out there, and I like to warm up with mugs because it's just like an automatic thing. Threw some mugs, and we're starting that cycle, and life is good.
That's awesome. Oh, that's so smart. Like, in terms of picking, to me, what I'm hearing is everything you've chosen in terms of the type of business model you picked with focusing on wholesale all points to the bullet point, if you will, the center of the target that is you get to focus most of your time on doing the one part of this whole thing that you actually like the most.
Absolutely. And it ties into your lifestyle. And having a studio at home is wonderful. You're always managing water content. So, to be able to cover, uncover, take things off of bats, let them set up so you can lift them off the bat. I don't throw, cut, grab, and lift off because I throw things thinner than that. They would distort terribly. I can't do that. I have to let them set up first, partially dry, then I take them off. And it's interesting because I would like to know how many hours I spend, but on the other hand, I don't want to know. As long as I feel like I'm comfortable with it.
It's better for your well-being, I think, to not count it.
Yeah. I've been in management my whole life in ownership positions, and I never kept track of how many hours I worked. And because you probably wouldn't want to know the answer. It's made a living, didn't get rich. So going to make pots as long as I can. And I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do in retirement. I just won't call it retirement. I just call it working.
Which is actually, as I've heard from some of my parents' friends and things like that, you're probably avoiding the big kind of identity, mental health crisis of like, okay, well, what the heck do I do now? What do I do with my time? I know people who retired and then turned around and started my junior high band director. That was pretty formative in my growing up. Retired, kind of didn't know what to do, didn't have an identity. I mean, I'm putting my words on him, but didn't have an identity without it. So then all of a sudden was teaching at a community college where he moved to a warmer climate. He got that part of retirement right. He moved out of all this, but then was like volunteering or I don't know if he was getting paid or not, but was back into it in a maybe more manageable way because it was like, well, but this is what I love. This is what I do.
And you can find outgrowths from that. I'm the volunteer art teacher at our local Catholic grade school where my same two granddaughters go. And so twice a month for a whole day, as the different ages cycle through my classroom, we do art. And it's great to be with kids and have that interaction. Mr. Steve, can I do this? I'm like, you're the artist. You can do whatever you'd like on that. Or sometimes I have to set rules, of course.
I was going to say, how different is that from how you were then taught? Because I feel like there's been a shift there, even in my own lifetime, of how it was approached of like, well, you can learn how to do this properly or you can figure it out yourself.
We have a project and we have an hour per class. And so I follow elementary art Instagram teachers and peruse Pinterest, and it's like, oh, nope, that one takes 3 class periods. Can't do that one, but find interesting, fun things. And I have a mom and a grandma that help me in the class. And I leaned over to one of them during class and I said, why wouldn't they like art as their most favorite class? I mean, look at this. We're letting them run amok. We have to close the door. It gets noisy sometimes, but we have a lot of fun. Yeah, we learn stuff.
I had another tangible kind of pragmatic thing when it comes to the wholesale business, because the other thing I can't wrap my brain around just yet is, by now that I'm a systems gal, and I love to underpromise and overdeliver. But when it comes to pots, they like to dry at the speed of Mother Nature, and we both live in the Midwest, and Mother Nature likes to screw with us on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's true.
And so with that, knowing retailers have to plan ahead of time as it is, right? Let me give a more specific example to try and nail down into this. We're recording right now at the beginning of February. I'm sure retailers were probably thinking about Valentine's Day a month ago, hopefully. So then you're making pots for Valentine's Day in November? How much do you have to kind of think of that even farther in advance and communicate that with realtors in terms of the timeline of pottery?
So my granddaughters and I, and when I say that, I mean, I always just help enough to ensure success. And that's less and less and less, of course, as they learn stuff. They make seasonal things, but I do not. So I don't have any heart-shaped dishes. I don't sell Christmas ornaments. I have 2 different kinds of soup bowl. big serving bowl, butter, French butter bells, chip and dips, dip bowls, small mugs, standard mugs, latte mugs, tall cafe mugs, two different styles of altered bakers. One's oval and a couple of them are rectangles. And so their selling needs are seasonal. They're gonna maybe aim at Mother's Day. I have a specific shop in North Carolina that they have big pottery tours at a certain time of the year. So she wants to be well stocked to that. That's like August, I think. And then in Maine, in Bar Harbor, they have cruise ship after cruise ship after cruise ship come in of people to see all the fall colors of leaves. Okay, so fall is like huge and Christmas is like, okay, it's Christmas. And so different shops have different timelines. And what I do now, and this is the third year, is I send an email to my shops the second or very first part of January, and I say, order now for the whole year. And one of my glaze choices on Indomie is to be determined at shipping. So if somebody is in January trying to order something in September for September delivery, they just choose that. And they just tell me they want 40 mugs and 6 of this and 12 of that or whatever. And then come August, I say, now's the time to tell me. And they go out and they say, oh, okay, I've got enough of this color or that color. I want this. And oh, your new color is gorgeous. I want that. And so they don't have to make as many critical detail decisions in January. And then I'm able to take those orders and slot them into how I can produce X number of pots every month. And when do I need to ship it based on what they want? And, by the 15th of January, I'm like, yeah, can't give you anything in May because that's already all booked up. And so as we sit here now, I'm booked out through November.
That's fantastic.
It is a wonderful problem to have.
How long have you had that book for the whole year? Is that kind of I'm assuming, and I don't want people to make the wrong assumptions, I'm assuming that this happened over time as you had repeat stores.
It definitely happened over time. Yes. And it was, so I started wholesale in 2010, and it was for the next 8 years, it was like, oh, get an order. And it usually says ASAP is when they want it. And sometimes I would try to actually at that point stockpile mugs. And I have a gallery here at my studio and home. And sometimes I would have, I don't have just one pie plate in electric blue. I have 2 or 3 of them. So when somebody orders one, I go out there and grab it. And that might shorten the production time. And here's a trick that I used for many years, and it's still in effect out in the garage, is I always make things in series. So if an order has 3 pie plates on it, I'm not going to make 3 pie plates. I'm going to make 8 or 12, and I'm going to bisque them all, and I'm going to glaze the 3 I need for the order. Then I'm going to look in my gallery. Okay, I'm missing a color, so I'll glaze the color that I need in my gallery, and I'll take the rest of them and I'll put them on a box and a shelf that says pie plates. So that ideally, when I get that order for wholesale that says ASAP, I can walk out in the garage and pull, I never was able to pull all of it, but pull a lot of it out of the boxes and go, okay, I've already got those bisqued and ready to glaze. If I've got enough of them, I can even start to glaze those and get that in the process. But wait, no, I shouldn't do that. I need to actually make what I don't have so it starts to dry. And while it's drying and maybe bisque firing, I could be glazing and trying to leapfrog the process to speed up the delivery of that order as timely as possible.
Francesco's going to feel so vindicated right now with the time. I was getting so anxious last year about the time he spent on, we have built a lot of shelving in our basement, in our garage, in all these places. And he was like, I can't function until the space functions well. Because exactly what you just described is exactly what he does. And so we have a huge, long, we just got we got studs from a supply store, like a Lowe's or whatever, and just cheap studs and particle board on top of each other. No big deal. But absolutely, it's the sets he makes are whatever number fits a board, a wear board, right? Like that's going to be the number of that item that gets made, regardless of the order number.
Yeah, before I took down the Christmas tree, I threw through 16 mug bodies because 16 fit on the shelf. And I'm still using the same Shimpo potter's wheel that I got in 1970, 1980. And I'm still using the same tempered masonite bats that I cut out that first summer in the driveway at my parents' house. They are not in good shape. And I used to have like 60, and now I'm down to like 35. But so I had to make some new ones. But yeah, so 16 of them fit on the shelf. And it also happens that after I take them off the bat, they fit on my wear boards. It's the same 16. So it's like, yeah, 16. And it's more efficient to make 16 than to make the 8 I need for the order and then wait for another order that I need, whatever, and try to have some kind of stockpile. But the original question was, how long have I been booking the whole year in January? So 2019 and 2020, 2019 was like super busy and things were filling up and it's going great. And then COVID hits and like nobody wants anything because the retailers closed. Later in the year, some of them switched to online stuff and they ordered some things. So I'm making cold calls trying to sell pots then, which not very much luck. But then coming out of COVID, 2021 and on, it's like boom. That's when I've been doing that now since. Well, actually 2021 is like I just kept taking orders and then got to November and December and realized I had 6 months worth of stuff to make. And I was like, oh, this was not good. That was a classic over promise and under deliver. And it's like, oh no.
I would like everyone to hear that as permission to the fact that after 14 years in one particular business, let alone the decades before that, you still make mistakes and you still improve and learn new things.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, in January of 2022 is when I started doing that. So 2, 3, and 4. I've done it 3 years now. And unfortunately, that first year I had like 3 months of stuff that was already booked because I'm like calling my shops and like, do you still want this? You know, a different timeline than you. And everybody's usually pretty forgiving. But now I'm trying to work on that over deliver rather than over promise.
Right. How much, this actually brings up another question for me. If it's even a manageable question, this might be the $1 million question that's not really answerable, but maybe in particular business decisions or systems or this new way of ordering that you've implemented, but the difference between when you first started on the wholesale site and like you were saying in the beginning, you were accepting a lot of those immediate orders, send it to me as soon as possible kind of things.
Send me orders. I'll take it. I'm good.
My assumption is that it just organically changed over time where you started getting the reorders, those relationships came from saying yes to those immediate ones at the beginning. Or I guess what I'm getting at is how much of the way your business functions today is different than it was at the beginning of starting wholesale in 2003, you said? No, 2010.
2010. 2010 is when I decided to do retail, or rather wholesale. Because I had a nice display in my retail store. We sold home decor things, so it was natural and it did really well there. And of course, I was always there to talk it up. It's handy and fun to work with direct consumers. And that's a big plus when you do the shows. So the base of the business really hasn't changed. You develop a line of products that you can economically and efficiently produce. And you do a lot of market research based on your sales as to what glazes to put on those. And I use some of the same glazes that I have for longer than 2010. And they've proven reliable and beautiful and popular. And then you work on developing new things because talking with the shop from 2010, she has always ordered and stocked 3 colors at a time. And those colors have changed over time. And she, to some degree, has changed which items she carries as a way of showing a different look to her customer. And that's why, as a retailer, when I was at markets, I was always interested in what's new, because a lot of shops, galleries have the same people that come in. Even if that's a tourist area and you get that same vacation home owner that comes for their week, every year, they love your gallery and they're going to come in and they would like to see something that's new. They wouldn't like to have the exact same things sitting on the shelf. So, although the mechanics of items, well made, current in color or appeal, it's like I am not going to glaze anything peach. Sorry, that was our wedding colors. That's that's like 1981. I'm not going there.
Pantone just announced it as the color of the year this year,
It,
so
I said that. Yep, not going there. Are you? You're going to jump right on that bandwagon?
hell no. I'm all about this is part of the reason I'm asking some of these questions is when I think about retail, I think about people having to stay constantly change with trends and constantly change with seasons. And I was so relieved to hear you say, I have my set items, they're not seasonal, this is what it is, and it's working. Because I don't want to make heart-shaped bowls. I don't want people to have that much stuff in their house where they're changing out their. I mean, I shouldn't say this out loud because I want people to buy pots, but I would, we're a household of like a single item that serves multiple purposes rather than let me pull out the pink plates right now for the next month, and then I'll pull out the snowflake ones for winter, and then I'll have the leaf shaped ones for September and October. Like, I don't want to.
It's not like we as wholesalers can ignore the market. We do make things that sell. That's why I make, 1,500 mugs a year. But there's always that debate. Are you making things that are that sell? Are you making things that you like, that you want? Okay. I think I'm pretty safe to say your line and my line are basic and beautiful pots on an everyday basis, and they are not seasonal, and they appeal to a segment of the market and a wide enough segment of the market. I am not trying to serve a niche market. My pieces are beautifully glazed, but I don't spend an hour on each one doing surface decoration. I totally appreciate and admire pots that are done that way. I can't do that. I can't draw very well, for one thing. The kids laugh at me when I try to draw something. My samples for school for the elementary kids look like an adult made, kids art. But then when the kids make it, it is so doggone cute. But I, I'm off subject again.
I had an instructor once for pottery tell me that I needed to sketch the shapes and to like get comfortable sketching because how was I going to throw it? And I was like, absolutely not. This does not actually help me with throwing. This is worse. And this isn't reflective of what was in my head. That's not the shape I was actually going for. Let me get close to that on the wheels.
And I know there are people that sketch pots, but I've never done that either. Never done. I'd rather sit down and experiment. Because for the last 6 years, come December, when I'm not so pushed for wholesale orders, I will design a new mug style and hopefully have a glaze that I've been working on to put on that new style mug. And then I give that new mug style to my kids and grandkids in their Christmas stocking. And a couple of those are now in my line. My latte style mug and my special edition mug were Christmas mugs at one time. And it's like you sit down and you have a concept and you throw the first one. I'm going, nope. Throw the fifth one. Yeah, maybe that part. And by the time you get to the 12th one, it's like, okay, maybe I'm onto something. And then there was one Christmas mug. It's like, no, just never did catch it. And you're using that critical eye, and you're teaching your hand what to do to make that. Francisco would know that, you could put a blindfold on him and he could make that mug that he's made so many times. And yet when you get the my 16 or his 42, whatever fits on his shelf, you really look at them, they're still different. And that's what makes them handmade. That's what makes them special. And it's really heartwarming when somebody contacts you and says, yours is my favorite mug in my whole kitchen. And I'm sure you get that too. That's the connection that we're searching for when we're making handmade pottery.
Do you find that the shops you've partnered with over time, if you do any direct to consumer, is it because the shops you're working with are actually telling people where they're made and encouraging and promoting like your brand as well? Because I think this might be another kind of misnomer about wholesale. I think Sometimes it can be true that no one knows who you are because they remember the shop that they bought it at. But I think in the best of worlds, and I think of wholesale as very much like a partnership and a relationship, it's a mutually beneficial thing for growth.
It absolutely is. You do depend on each other. We're each half of a chain. So I provide a little tent, a little 1.5 by 2 inch card tent style with a picture of one of my pots on the front and my logo. And on the inside, I have like an artist statement and a care card information. And on the back, it has my name, address, phone number, and website, because I have a retail website also. And yes, people will reach out and buy things from me on my retail site. And I would say by far the better part, if not 70, 80% of all those orders are somebody that has seen me in one of the galleries, or even more likely already bought something. And they either have that card or they turn my pot over and my full name is on the bottom. I hand sign each pot and it's mostly legible. I mean, you might have to Google a couple different spellings, but it's mostly legible. And I think that's key to building your brand across the nation.
That's so smart. I told you there'd come a moment where this would happen to me. As you were talking, it made me think of a question, and what that was, it's floating somewhere in the ether above this microphone. I have no idea. But that does also make me realize how much of your time I've already used up, and I want to be mindful of that because I could keep digging in. I think we just have to add another reason of why we need to come to Minnesota. A friend of mine has moved there. I could pick your brain on this for ages and kind of elbow Francesco in the side of like, see, listen, like, eh?
Yeah, you've done a lot of experimenting now with the travel to the show thing and developed, experience there. And it's a different way of doing things. Any of our methods of making a living, making pottery is a lifestyle choice. It's one of the things I garnered from all of your interviews is each person has personalized that to their life situation and to their liking, made it their own. And all seem to be happy with the choices they've made. Because if you're not happy with it, you can always change it. So it'll be interesting to see where your journey takes you now that you've got those shows underneath your belt.
Oof. Much to the way you said, there's such a joy and so much to learn from doing in-person shows in the beginning and getting that engagement with people right away. We learned a lot about why people choose to buy our stuff specifically compared to however many other booths there were, which is invaluable. And so I think I kind of also can see why so many people I've talked to start with those markets in the beginning, right? You're learning a lot very quickly. But there was one weekend I remember sitting there. We were at a show outside of Milwaukee in the Chicago suburbs, and we were staying with dear friends of mine who Janae is one of the photographers from my company, from my team. And I turned to her on that Sunday morning before we went back to the show and went, I found the one thing that's more exhausting than weddings. How did I do that? Like, wait a second, we weren't supposed to go backwards here. We were supposed to go forwards. Needless to say, I don't think we'll have 5 weekends in a row this year.
Oh, you did have one that was 5 weekends in a row?
Well, not one show, 5 different shows, 5 weekends in a row.
Right. Okay.
One show, 5 weekends in a row probably would be manageable.
Well, only if you got to leave your stuff there securely somehow, maybe. In Minnesota, we have what's called the Renaissance Festival, and it's a medieval times thing, and you have to dress up. If you're exhibiting or you're part of the paid crew that makes this whole thing look like you're entering the medieval times, minus the filth.
You shower every day, actually.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, that you actually have to build out wood and build a small city, and then you can leave your stuff there, and people actually do their craft there and stuff, and that goes multiple weeks, and it's like, oh my goodness, that'd be so exhausting. That would be an extreme example of a lifestyle business choice.
Oh yeah. There was actually I imagine the Twin Cities or other areas around where you are probably have Chris Kindle markets or some version thereof.
Like a pop-up street market thing at Christmas?
Yeah, like the Christmas. Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. Maybe it exists.
There was one that started here near us this year, and I love the idea because the Chris Kindle Market in Chicago is very popular. But when we looked at the terms to do this show, it was like Wednesday through Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday were nights, all day Saturday, Sunday, and like 12, at least, I want to say at least 8 hours, maybe 10, for like 6 weeks. And they were marketing it. They were wanting to market it to like local shops. And I'm thinking, what local business has the manpower to be away from whatever their shop is? Oh, it was a few $1,000s. It was very pricey, which if you've got thousands of people, I think of our community member, Yvonne, who's in Vienna. She just did one there. And those are kind of, people travel for those. They're a known entity. It was absolutely worth it for her. She had fantastic success. But the tradition and the famousness, if you will, the knownness of the Austrian Chris Kindle markets is maybe a different level and worth the price compared to the Wauwatosa Chris Kindle market.
Or the Minneapolis one where it could be a blizzard.
Also, but like it was also just thinking about for all of us, it was kind of like the amount of time to make enough stuff to have inventory for 6 weeks. It didn't make any sense. I've completely gone down a separate rabbit hole now on this, but
that's markets to the max. That's what that is.
Yes. Oh man. Well, not that was the note to end on. We had a much better little beautiful ribbon at the end about 5 minutes ago before I went down that rabbit hole. Steve, since you do have your retail store, for people who want to see these glazes we're talking about and see the items that make sense for wholesale, where do you want to send them on the internet?
I do have my retail site is stevetubbspottery.com, and Instagram is at Steve Tubbs Pottery, so it's not too hard to find. And then I'm on Into-Me, and we'll put the contact information for that, where you can go see the mechanics of how that works. It's a visitor password. You can't place an order there, and of course our potters are not going to want to do that anyway, so that works perfectly. So we'll put that in the show notes then.
Perfect. I think with a little luck, that Instagram count might see a bit of a tick upwards.
Well, that would be nice. And the other thing I could do is post more often.
Yeah, that might help. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe I should just throw in the cute grandkids.
Look, for one, let us back up and say you chose this business model for a reason. And the fact that you don't have to worry about Instagram is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So don't fix it if it ain't broken. But yes, you're going to have to at least post a picture of the grandkids so we can all see now, as long as their parents are okay with it.
Yeah, their snowmen are on there. I posted their snowmen that we made last, and it's like
perfect. That's all we need. It's the whole Instagram needs to just be their projects. Actually, I like that it's like its own thing.
I'm already like girls. You know how when you get a little bit older and maybe you're in high school and you go to McDonald's and you get a job or you work somewhere else. I said, you would never have to do that if you did this. And you could do so much better doing this and have fun. Not that there isn't life lessons to be lived, or to learn rather, working at McDonald's or whatever else you might do as a first job. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I think it's more fun to make your own way.
That's going to be something really cool to see where they go, because I had such a hard time wrapping my brain around being an entrepreneur because, in hindsight, we knew people, but growing up, it didn't seem that way, so it's going to be cool.
When you live your life as an entrepreneur, it's a completely different mindset than when you go to work for somebody. And you surrender a lot of things when you work for someone else, and you are paid and rewarded because of that. And, I had retail store for 25 years, and like I said, we made a living. We didn't get rich. That's the way that went. You live without regrets. You do things that you love along the way and have fun and make changes to your life. And we love our new lives. We love this.
That's a much better ending than me talking about Chris Kindle markets. We're going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time. Oh my gosh, I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. It's a lot of fun. That is one drawback of working, doing wholesale, is you don't get to talk to a lot of people. And my town of 20,000 does not have any other potters. And, it's community that you're building is not something that's real thick, in rural America, I guess.
Exactly.
Or likely to be found in a city or surrounding the red clay centers of the world and things like that.
Well, you know where to come to talk a lot of clay all the time.
That's right.
I have to admit, the idea of having enough interest in our work so that we can request a year's worth of orders be made by springtime, allowing us to plan out a calm or relatively calm making cycle for an entire year with control of the chaos that typically happens around Q4 at the end of the year and the holidays. Well, that business model that Steve shared, it sounds like an absolute dream to me. And I just want to repeat something that he said. Whether you decide you want to wholesale your work or not, it doesn't matter. Something he said applies to every business model on the planet, in my mind, making or otherwise. In case you were half listening while you're in the studio, Steve mentioned that the demand for his work to have this type of model, well, it didn't happen overnight. Steve has tweaked and adjusted this system for years. And he focused on building relationships with retailers over time, not just orders and transactions. Now, that's a topic for another day that I frankly have been thinking quite a lot lately, relationships versus transactions with our customers. But that'll just have to wait for a future episode. For now, I just wanted to reiterate that making a living from the things we make isn't necessarily a fast path. Sure, maybe some people you see online get lucky every once in a while, and the aesthetic that they have been working on, frankly, probably for years, happens to time well with a popular trend. But they were working on that aesthetic well before it was trendy. But let's just say, hypothetically, that for a brief period of time, the aesthetic and the trend synchronized together in beautiful harmony for a big old moment of success. I did just say moment, though. Because if it's a trend, that doesn't necessarily mean that that maker stays on top forever. Trends change. Things ebb and flow. And building a business that supports our lives, in that order, I might emphasize, lives, then business, well, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm mentioning this because from some recent conversations we've had inside of the community, it seems that it might be surprising for people to know that growing a business and pursuing your dreams, well, sometimes it's boring. And when the boredom starts to show up, it can make you wonder whether or not you're making the right choices. Are you marketing your work in the right way? Do you need to go start using a completely different social media platform now because that's the right way? Doing whatever other right thing the internet is yelling at you about. And it makes you start to get the idea that maybe you should do something differently. When in reality, sometimes it's that you just need to stay the course. Even if it gets boring. It takes time to gain traction. It takes time to build relationships. It takes time for those relationships to be so big in number that you can request all of your orders by springtime for the whole rest of the year. Anyway, that is definitely a whole other subject that we don't have time to dig into today, and honestly, it's one of those huge subjects that don't exactly have an ending for something like a podcast episode. I can't wrap it up in a bow for you. And that's exactly why it's a conversation that's happening ongoing inside of the community. So if you're interested in that, you know where to find us. Come learn more at makersplaybook.com/community. But I wasn't trying to get a pitch for the community into this episode, although by now you should know I think it's awesome. But What I did want to make sure I told you before we finish up this week's episode is something far more time sensitive. I am officially preparing to open back up the doors to the Maker's photography styling system. Now, I don't have it ready just yet, but my goal is the second week of June at the absolute latest. Now, that might sound like a really long way away, but June is actually 2 weeks away, my friend. So, if you've been waiting since last year, which was a much longer time, which was the last time we ran this course, in fact, if you've been waiting since then to join this 6-week class that deep dives on the subjects of composition, color theory, utilizing texture, adding props to your photos, creating flat lays, and all around learning what actually makes for a good photo, then you're going to want to pop your email address onto the waitlist to be first when the doors open. Our waitlisters get early access before doors open to the public. And I'm saying that kind of twice in a row because if last year is any indicator, then the spots we have available for this course are more than likely going to sell out. So go ahead and grab a towel right now, wipe the mud off your hands. It's fine. I can wait. No big deal. And pop on over to makersplaybook.com/waitlist to put your email on that list. That way, you and I both don't have to rely on the fickle algorithm to let you know when the doors are open. Because we all know how that works out. Am I right? So one more time, in case you were still finding the towel, it's makersplaybook.com/waitlist if you want to be the first to know when the doors open again in just a couple of weeks to the Maker's photography styling system. This episode was made possible thanks in part to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of the Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray Epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray Epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.